A big part of my career has been looking at the therapeutic value of the 12 steps because the 12 steps really have harnessed some powerful psychological forces that creates an amazing change in our life. What is that change? Well, the truth is that the 12 steps are engineered to help us achieve emotional sobriety, to achieve true independence of spirit, to achieve autonomy, to learn how to take care of ourselves. These are things that we don't know. Emotional sobriety really helps us learn how to have a healthy relationship, how to have union with the preservation of our integrity, how to cooperate with integrity. Most of us get lost in our relationships. Most of us do a lot of things we don't want to do. We don't really know how to show up in a good way. Emotional sobriety is about learning to have healthy relationships. Well, we're going to be talking about the chapter in my book, 12 Essential Insights on Emotional Sobriety, that has to do with living life on life's terms. But before we dig into this chapter tonight and start to begin to unpack it, I want to take us through the journey that's been building as we're developing this foundation of emotional sobriety in our life. So the first part of what I'm going to share tonight is more of a review in terms of how have we gotten to this point where now we're focused on living life on life's terms. So let's just take a journey back through the weeks and months that have preceded this moment in time. The first step towards emotional sobriety was waking up from our sleepwalking. And that becomes such an important step to realize that we've fallen into a trance in our life. The way that Fritz Perls described it is every one of us lived our lives in a way to desensitize ourselves from what was really happening in our lives. We wanted to insulate ourselves from experiencing our life firsthand so that we could live this idealized image of how we should be and how life should be. And to do that, we had to numb ourselves out. We had to desensitize ourselves. We had to become automatons and just living our life without really feeling much meaning or feeling much anything or not wanting to feel anything at all in our lives. So whatever woke you up, whatever made you answer the alarm that goes off, as Gurdjieff says, is that we all get this alarm that invites us to wake up from this trance that we've fallen into. Whatever it is, as soon as you quit hitting the snooze button and you wake up, you start to develop, and this is the second step, you start to become more conscious of what's going on in your life. It's almost like, and I love the analogy that Herb Kagan uses all the time, we begin to thaw out. We begin to feel things and experience things that we didn't feel. I was talking to somebody earlier in a counseling session today, and he says, my God, one of the things that's happened to me in my recovery is that all of a sudden I have all these feelings that I have no idea what to do with. Well, that's why we didn't want to experience them before. We didn't know what to do, how to manage these feelings, how to cope with our emotions. We had no idea on how to handle our experiences. So we didn't want them. We pushed them away. So as we become conscious now and we start to feel what we didn't feel, we start to see things that we didn't want to see. We start to hear things that we didn't want to hear. We even start to say things that we couldn't imagine would have ever come out of our heart and out of our mouths. Because we start, as we're waking up, we start to become conscious of what's really going on in our life. With that consciousness, the flames start to get stoked to develop a curiosity or a psychological mindedness about ourselves and our experience. Hey, how come I reacted the way I did? Hey, I'm disturbed. What's creating this disturbance I have? Bill said there's something off with me. Well, what might be off with me that I'm upset with this person? Because before, when we were in our trance, it was all their fault, right? Or our fault. And now we're just trying to understand. We're not trying to blame anymore. Blame starts to go into the background, and curiosity and understanding start to come forward for us. It's a remarkable shift that is beginning to create a new consciousness that's laying the foundation for a new consciousness. So what happens after that? What's the next step that takes place? Well, we start, as we become conscious, we start to realize that this emotional dependence that Bill talks about has been operating and is the culprit behind all of the things that are upsetting us in our lives, all of the things that are making it difficult to be in sync with our life, to find a better way to be coordinated with reality, to be aligned with reality. You see, this emotional dependence has a gravitational pull and pulls us down to the lowest possible lowest possible denominator within ourselves. And when we're interacting with someone else, the emotional dependence pulls us down to the lowest common denominator between us. We operate from our lowest self, not our best self. We become immature. We become demanding. We pout when things don't go our way. We don't want to be disappointed. We don't want things to not, we want things to be the way we want them. We don't want to accept reality as it is. We want reality to conform to our expectations. See, that's what we start to realize, is that this emotional dependence has really created a prison around us that now we're not in charge. This is where the unmanageability of our life has come from. This is what the second half of the first step was all about. In emotional sobriety, we begin to realize this when we hit this third step or rung of the ladder that we're climbing up. And that's how I want you to think of it. This first step was waking up. The next step or next rung on that ladder was becoming conscious. And now our third rung is becoming aware of our emotional dependence and how it has riddled itself through our lives, how it has controlled our consciousness, how it has created this unmanageability that has created so much emotional suffering and so much damage in our relationships with others, and especially those people that are most important to us. As we begin to see the depth, as Bill called it, the depth of this gravitational pull, the depth of our emotional dependence, how much our life has really been based on it. The way that Fritz Perls called it is that we realize that our life is dependent on environmental support. We want our environment to support us. We don't know how to support ourselves. That's what's created the emotional dependence. As we see this, we see that one of the things and a big impact that this emotional dependence has had on us is that we take everything personally. We make everything about us. That when somebody's talking to us, we don't listen to what they're saying and help us understand who they are. We immediately think about, how does this reflect on how they feel about us? And we're off to the races. We now get mad, we get angry, we get sad, we get depressed because we don't like the reflection that we think, that we see, that the other person feels about us. And it creates a complete mess, taking things personally. As we become aware of this, that the emotional dependence has created this, and because now we've developed this consciousness, we start to get curious about, what can I do to not take things so personally? And as you heard us say over and over again, the first step to change is awareness, and the second step is acceptance of what we become aware of. Awareness and then self-acceptance of what we become aware of are the foundations of starting to change something. We have to own who we are before we can become something we're not. It's the only path to recovery, the only path to true transformation and change. And it's paradoxical. When I say I'm taking everything personally, now I have a chance to not take things personally, but I can't get there until I own that truth. Just like I can't start to learn how to manage my life until I claim my unmanageability. I can't get honest until I claim how dishonest I am. I can't grow up until I claim how emotionally immature I am. I can't become less depending or demanding until I own how demanding and how many claims I put on you and life for things to be the way I want them to. So we take what the other person does personally, we take life personally, and we take what we do personally as well. We think that what we're doing is because of what the other person is doing, not just what the other person is doing because of what we're doing, but we blame the other person for what we're doing. So everything becomes about us. It's all about us. And we can't see what the reality is until we start to see that it's not about us. That other people do what they do because of who they are. It's not because of who we are. We start to realize we're responsible to other people, not for them. We start to have some freedom. And this is what emotional sobriety is about. It's a consciousness of freedom. We start to get free from some of the shackles of what that emotional dependence has put on us. We start to have relationships without all of these entanglements and all of these rules. Because if I'm going to take everything personally, then I'm going to have a whole set of rules about how you're supposed to behave so that I'm okay. It's back to that undifferentiated consciousness. I'm okay if my girlfriend does this, or I'm okay if my boyfriend, or I'm okay if my husband, or if my wife, I'm okay if life. It's an I'm okay if consciousness that then gets us so shackled to what is happening. And when we're shackled to it, we can't deal with it because we're going to object to it and we don't think it should be this way, as Howard was saying in the beginning. This is where the expectations, we start to become aware of what these expectations are and how these expectations have grown out of our emotional dependence. See, our emotional dependence creates claims and demands, and those claims and demands turn into expectations, and those expectations become unenforceable rules. And that's what dominates our life, these unenforceable rules that are grounded in our emotional dependence and how things are supposed to be. Well, what happens after we start to take things personally? I think the next chapter could have also been labeled radical responsibility, not just no one is coming. And that's what happens next is we take a radical responsibility for our life. The way that Fritz Perls said it is no real change can take place until you own how you create your existence, how you create the things that upset you, how you create your symptoms, how you create your disease, how you've created your alcoholism, how you've created all the troubles you've had in relationships in your life, how you've created all the trouble you have with life. When you do that, you begin to change because that's when you start to grow up. That's when you start to realize, look, this is what I've created. Now, what do I need to do to get to work to create a new existence that's based on a more solid bedrock that we can call emotional sobriety? It's pretty phenomenal. If you look at the arc that's taking place here in terms of our what is happening and what is happening to us in our experience. It's the same arc of change that takes place when you work the 12 steps. It's the same arc of change that takes place when you're in good psychotherapy. Same things start to happen to you. So what's the next thing that happens? And that's what we were talking about for the last 5 weeks before this week, is accepting life, accepting what is. Easier said than done, just like tonight. Living life on life's terms is a lot easier said than done. It's a simple concept, but it's a difficult thing to execute in our life. It's going to take a lifelong work and practice to be able to master this stuff. And as Bill said it, and there was a lot of wisdom in this, is that we strive for spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Because that part of us, right, that's grounded in the old consciousness says we have to be perfect to be okay. That's the only way we're going to be loved, the only way we're going to be accepted. It's I am perfect. And then you know what we do? We put that on other people. The only way I'm going to love somebody is if they're perfect. And then reality strikes. Oh my God, I'm not perfect. They're not perfect. What do we do? That's the disillusionment that comes in every relationship. There's a period of disillusionment when you go from the fantasy about what you thought it was going to be to the reality of what it is. And sometimes that's an ugly reality. A lot of people throw in the towel, get divorced, thinking that it's the other person. If they just get rid of the other person, they're going to solve their problems. Those of us that have done that and tried that realize that that's not the cure. We got to learn to grow up. We got to learn to get more grounded in reality and learn how to have a relationship that's based on what I love, that John Amodeo calls it the authentic heart or authentic love. Eric Fromm calls it mature love as opposed to immature love. The love that most of us have is very immature love, and that's a love that's grounded in this emotional dependence. Authentic love is grounded in maturity and is grounded in emotional sobriety, is grounded in the ability to support yourself and not looking to the other person to support you. So we talked about for the last 5 weeks how challenging accepting what is can be, especially when it's so horrendous and terrible, and it seems so wrong and unfair, and it is so unfortunate. And the only way to deal with a situation like that is to not accept it and to keep not accepting it. And every time you rage and scream, I won't accept it, you get an inch closer to acceptance. That's the only way that acceptance happens. So that acceptance is aligning us to reality. And like I said earlier, when I was reading the preamble to this meeting, emotional sobriety is having an appropriate and honest relationship to reality, is to dealing with reality as reality is, not as we want it to be, not as we'd like it to be, not as we'd hope it would be or want it to be, but as it is. And sometimes that can be friggin' brutal. You guys heard about it in terms of when I talked about Christine and what she was, or Charlene, in terms of losing her daughter through cancer and the horrible experience that she had, that she suffered through that whole loss of her child. But there were many lessons that she taught us in terms of how she met that and how she dealt with it, and especially in the work that we did in therapy together. And please, if you haven't read the book, please get a hold of the book and read it up to this point in time. So here we come to the next chapter, living life on life's terms. As I said, the concept seems so simple, doesn't it? But it requires a major shift in our consciousness. The nature of this shift was so well captured by Dr. Viktor Frankl. So Dr. Frankl was a psychiatrist. He was Jewish. I believe at the time that World War II broke out and the Nazis started to now invade and conquer Europe, that he was in Austria and a practicing psychiatrist. And he was taken to one of the Nazi concentration camps, the death camps. For some reason, they did not. He was put on a workforce. He was never taken into the gas chamber, but he witnessed the deaths of thousands and thousands fellow Jews. he had his manuscript for the book that you guys may know of called Man's Search for Meaning. And when he was taken prisoner, he hid it in his pant leg. And he tried to keep it. And every night that he was in the concentration camp, he tried to memorize more and more of the book because he knew at some point in time the manuscript would be discovered and taken away from him. And thank God he successfully memorized the whole manuscript before it was discovered. But because he was a psychiatrist and because he was awake, he was curious. Who survived this experience? What did it take in terms of the consciousness of these men that he was living with? What consciousness was required to be able to face this horrendous situation, this egregious situation that was happening in these death camps? How can you survive that? How can you not become despondent and just become nihilistic and just give up on humanity and life when you see life being treated so cheaply and brutally and so cruelly? Women and children gassed, taken for experiments and experimented on. I mean, the sadistic behavior was unbelievable that he witnessed. How can you have a consciousness that faces that on a daily basis and not only survive? He wasn't interested in surviving it. He was interested, as many psychologists were in the 50s, of what made people thrive, not just survive. How could one grow themselves through probably one of the most horrible, abominable situations that we can imagine, in terms of witnessing firsthand man's cruelty to man, killing women and children? Well, here's what he discovered. And to me, it's a remarkable thing because Bill Wilson found this too later on when he was talking about emotional sobriety. And listen, it was occurring at the same time. You see, there was a zeitgeist going on. There was a certain spirit of the times. There was a certain, just like when Freud discovered the unconscious, other people were thinking about this, but all of a sudden it manifested through Freud's consciousness that there was an unconscious. And there were many people at the time, Charcot was one, that was thinking about this, and they were doing a lot of experiments with hypnosis and looking at the different states of consciousness. But Freud's the one that really put together a system to understand it. Well, the same way that that consciousness was starting to surface and emerge back in the 1900s, in the 1940s, in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, this consciousness that Dr. Frankl observed in the concentration camp was also starting to emerge. And this is what he saw. This is what he said. He says, we realized that we had to teach ourselves and we had to teach other men that it did not matter, and listen to my words carefully, that it did not matter what we expected from life. Now get a hold of that. Didn't matter what we expected from life. We could not have any expectations. Any expectations we had that things were supposed to be normal, or that somehow somebody would treat somebody with some kind of humanity, with some kind of dignity, didn't happen. You see, every one of their expectations about what should have been, of any kind of morality, were completely wiped away. If they held that, all they could do would be suffer, and suffer terribly in terms of what they were witnessing. So we had to see ourselves as men that had to let go of our expectations, and instead of expecting life to be what we wanted it to be, is that we had to see ourselves as those that were being challenged by what life was. And that our job was to find the best response to the situation that we were facing at that given time. That it did not matter what we expected from life, but what life expected from us. That's how Viktor Frankl said it. And so for these men, sometimes that meant bringing life down to the decision, do I take the cup of broth that might have some boll weevil so I have some protein in it that morning? Or do I take a piece of hard chew that I'm going to be chewing on the rest of the day? Sometime it came on down to that kind of decision. How can I find a piece of paper to put in my shoes so when I'm walking in the snow, I don't get my feet burned from the snow? Those are the situations that they had to deal with. And what he saw is those men that let go of everything is now they started to feel good about how they were dealing with the life that was presented to them. And they felt that they were growing spiritually. That not only did they survive, but they thrived. And he said it was how each of us had to carry the cross that we were given that mattered. We couldn't quibble about what cross we were given. It was our job that once we were given that cross is the best way to find and carry it. That's what living life on life's terms means. And the step to this that's so important is to surrender all of our expectations. It is impossible to take the challenge of what life is going to set before you if you're holding on to your expectations. And now this is going to be a challenge. It's a simple concept, but it is an arduous execution. It's going to take a hell of a lot of work on your part to do it. Surrendering our expectations means surrendering those that are known to us. And when the unknown expectations now surface and emerge from our unconscious, that we also surrender those. And we must realize that we have two sets. We have those expectations that we are conscious of and those that we are not. In the weeks to come, we will be continuing to unpack how to live life on life's terms. But I wanted to kind of give you guys a review, show you how we've gotten here, and now help you see that this is the reason, sine qua non, of what emotional sobriety is all about, is learning to live life on life's terms. So I think I've said a lot tonight. I'm going to invite Tom, my discussant, and Tom Potash to join us as well. So there'll be two other discussants in the group with me tonight. Tom, can you come and join us? And Tom, can you come and join us? Or join me, I should say. And let's chat
You're
about
us. You're an us. There's several of you in there.
There are. Now there's three.
Yeah.
Three musketeers.
Hmm.
So I'm going to sit here and rock a while I'm dealing with
Right.
my pain.
Well, thanks, Alan. I can always use a review. That's a good thing. Lots of thoughts while you're talking. I'll just begin with one of my fallback positions, which is anybody can have a good day on a good day. That's the challenge, and what I tell people all the time, and when you have the good days, enjoy the hell out of them. It's fine. But that's not where we measure. It's not where we measure our growth. It's not where we measure things. And I don't mean I don't believe we have to seek out difficulty, but difficulty is coming. It's you talk about, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was something about just being aware, that difficult things are coming. It's like, I think you and I have talked about this before, but one of the things I tell young people, if I'm working with them when they're getting married, if they're getting married with a traditional kind of ceremony, I always take a moment to tell them, I say, the officiant is going to say, for better or worse, I want you to know he's really had a lot. She's lying to you, because it's not better or worse. It's better and worse, because it's all coming, and please know that. But here's the gift of emotional sobriety, and know that that's not a problem. you know but the fact that things are difficult, I mean, that's um I can't even remember who I'm quoting now, or paraphrasing, but I read something somewhere where one of the reasons in our culture that are we're unhappy is because we expect to be happy so much. It's it's not and and I think everybody who knows me in this situation knows I'm a fan of happy. I like having fun. I like being happy, but it's to me, and that's one of the things. It's right at the top of my website, that the thing that's more important to me than happiness is integrity, and you can do that in a measurable way, because that means every day of my life. And this is what the emotional sobriety thing is for me, is and about what it takes to accept life on life's terms, is the measure of the day, and ultimately the measure of my life is going to be my self-respect. It's how congruently am I living with my value system? First of all, we need to know what our value system is, our really in particular value system, and I want to live as congruently with that as possible. And as we move, I think, as what I was thinking about with this chapter, but as we move into the accepting life on life's terms, I think of this as doctorate level work on the serenity prayer. This is advanced learning here. This is, we're talking about really getting it down, really learning how to the complicated work of simplifying it to the point where you can apply it in the way that creates the most energy efficiency. Because I really do believe that if you look at the serenity prayer, it's all about energy efficiency. It's divest energy from the things I'm putting lots of energy into, that I don't have a chance in hell of changing or affecting any difference, and reinvest that energy in things that I can change. And those are often simple things that are just sitting there before me. Once I practice looking for those they do become more obvious, but at first not so much. And we get lots of support in our world for the other. But if I could just get Alan to act right, then my life is gonna be so much better. And it's like, I'm not gonna get Alan to work to act right.
Oh, no, yeah.
I've tried, people. I'm not gonna I'm exhausted. But seriously, it's not. And I love the fact that you're talking about Viktor Frankl, because he says, the paraphrase I use a lot he says, if you're wondering what the meaning of your life is, you need to know that it is you who is being asked the question. What do you, and that is such a proactive way of getting up and meeting the day. What do I want the meaning of my life in big picture? Sure. But how about we put it together? What do I want today to be for me? What do I want the meaning of my day? What's most important for me to do? There's two, before I finish here, I want to say there's two categories of things that I think of as that we can change, that is not only our right, but our responsibility to change. And that is the one that I think I've had I've been aware of for definitely as long as I've been in recovery, and probably even before that. But the idea of, in terms of living as best I can as a non-victim, is it's always my responsibility how I respond to what happens. It's not what happens to me that determines how I am. It's how I respond to what happens. That's exactly what Viktor Frankl's talking about in the most extreme conditions. And it's like, and I want to make the point that as Alan describes those most extreme conditions, the really cool part about this is this works in that extreme circumstance, and it works in just your day-to-day life. The same thing works. It's amazing. And if you can get to that place where that you could that you can know it's how I respond. But the second one that I tell you what, I've become more aware of this since we began this group 4 years ago, the group we were going to do for a couple of months, and that we now are doing. Aren't we 4 years in? Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, it's it's one of the things I've learned is the other place where we have control, Herb's out in the ocean, so he doesn't hear me use the word control. It's like, well, I don't know if it's control or just that we're in charge of doing this. And it makes all the difference in the world. And I believe I was doing some of this, but I don't think I knew what I don't think I was aware of it. I am responsible for how I interpret what is going on in my world, and I can change when I realize. And that's what Bill's talking about in the letter. When he doesn't say if you're in distress, you might want to check and see if you have unrealistic expectations. I'm the first one to jump on things when people just say things in absolute terms. But this is one that I believe does belong in absolute terms. If you're in distress, look for what unrealistic expectations you have, because you have them. Because I see a lot of people who get a hold of that, and then they kind of take it on as the question of, well, let me see if I have any unrealistic expectations. I'm going like, whether I can even come up with the answer or not. If I'm distressed, if I'm having a hard time, then so in the broadest sense, what it means is the world is what you were saying at the first, Alan. The world is not acting like I want it to. But what we need to get more specific about that, and to be able to say, okay, well, I can't control another human being. I can't control these other places, but I can actually change how I interpret things. And that's where we get into belief systems. And I'll wrap up with this. I had a good friend who died several years ago, wise man, weird man. I loved him so much, and he was so weird. When I would meet somebody new, his name was Bindle, and I would say, oh, I want to show them Bindle. Like it was just fun to watch people meet this guy, because he was going to make people think in different ways. He was going to get you thinking. And one of the things many things Bindle taught me, but what he used to say is, beliefs are choices. He says, and one of the points he was making is you don't, if you have a belief system, you don't have to prove it objectively, and you don't need to push it on anybody else. I don't need to sell it to you. I have a belief system. I believe it's right. And Potash, I need you to believe it too. It's like, no, I don't need you to do that. Belief systems, and what I even learned is that I don't even have to have a belief system that I know is objectively valid. I just need a belief system that is a good way to guide my way through my life. Belief system that I choose in that way is that I'm here. I'm on Earth to learn. I don't know if I have no idea how the fucking universe works. So, I mean, that may not be the design at all, but it's like, when I have that in mind, when I approach it as if, I am here specifically to learn, then that self-respect of mine can be increased every time I can learn something. And guess what? We can learn things when we do something well. And we all, well, everybody who shows up in this group has lots of examples of learning things by fucking things up, and it's like, we have a lot of material to work with, but it's, that's an example of that reframe. It's like going like, no, if I can figure out, that every time I do this, or most of the times when I act this way, I notice I get this result. Even if I don't know the solution yet, I'm making progress. But I'm reinterpreting the thing so that it's not a problem, it's a project. It's not a problem, it's a lesson. And I'm going to be able to, I want to apply that lesson, because as we talk about here all the time, not not any of the words that we say, any of the stuff that's in any of our books will do you a damn bit of good unless you find a way to take the stuff that means something to you and you translate it into practice, into daily practice, not just try it a couple of times, but daily practice. And that daily practice is an organic part of our lives, hopefully. And my practice, if I describe my daily practice today, it would be different than it was 6 months ago. It would be, it'll be different again and later on. But it's like there's always some things that I do, and some of them are quite active in the sense of like, just taking action, like getting up and doing my morning meditation or doing my morning readings, that kind of stuff. But other parts of that practice are just practicing these new ways of thinking, remembering I'm here to learn, remembering that when I feel that victim thing, which we all do, by the way, if somebody tells you they don't, they're lying to you, and so, because a lot of times what we need to do is when I feel, victimization, I need to go in and look for a better perspective. If I have a fender bender and I'm pissed off about it, it's going to make me late for work. I can sit there while waiting for the cops to come and think, you know what? If I didn't have this fender bender, I could have driven down the road a little bit more and might have been broadsided by a damn semi truck. For all I know, I'm alive in this moment because this person pulled out in front of me.
That's a
So yeah, you actually, it's weird because you can actually change something to gratitude, which is, I think, a beautiful thing. But anyway, it's our job to interpret, and our job to choose those belief systems that are going to work best for us. And that's all I've got to say about that.
Well, that kind of was, it's really cool, Tom, because yesterday I went to see the surgeon, right?
Yeah.
I did my hip, and he started out after they took the x-ray. He sat down and said, I first want to apologize to you. I made a mistake. And I'm going, wow, I like this.
Whoa.
He goes, when I wrote the prescription for your physical therapy, I did not write any restrictions on it. So they treated you like you were a normal hip replacement patient, and you are not. Your femur was weakened below the grand trochanter, I think it's called, or something like that. And I should have told them to be careful and not do any exercises that's going to put undue strain in that part. So your fracture is my fault. It wasn't CT. It wasn't that you pushed yourself too hard. He said you shouldn't have been doing those exercises, and that's my job to follow.
Wow.
And wow,
Love
man.
it.
And then what you just said, who knows? Had I gotten well and I was able to move around, I could have been in a car accident and killed somewhere. I mean,
That's right.
now, right? I mean, who knows? But
Yeah, crossing the street because
the
you
other
can
thing
walk
is,
so well.
it's by appreciating him, owning that he made a mistake. Maybe I made it okay for him to own that he made a mistake to somebody else if he does it.
Yes.
I told
Right.
him that, I told
So
him
much
that
respect for that. So much respect.
I said, I've made mistakes with some of my patients too.
Yeah.
And what I found is that when you own it and you take responsibility for it, our clients can be unbelievably gracious and generous in their forgiveness for what we do wrong if we take responsibility.
And we learn together. Yep.
We learn together, man. So it was a real, look,
That's good.
and of course I'm disappointed that I've got to deal with this pain a lot longer, and it's a lot different kind of pain, and it's very difficult. I'm having trouble sleeping at night, but I really appreciated the experience with him
I was
yesterday.
going to say, you have an experience that you can, again, you can really feel some gratitude for, because that's, yeah, that's it's unfortunate that that's a rare experience with the medical system, but it is, and and I'm glad you had that, and I'm glad you have a doctor who has some humility.
That's right, he does. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I
Tom?
what I find interesting, because I was thinking about this as this discussion was going on, the difference between perspective and comparison. Like, so, early days recovery comparison's good in a way, like going like, oh, that person can stay sober, so can I, right?
Yeah.
But when I get into my daily life, and I have these demands, these shoulds that I get, disturbed over, and I get locked into, if I break out the Viktor Frankl example, I could use that to beat myself up. It's like, he survived a concentration camp. I can't handle,
Why am I such a wuss, right?
Right.
exactly. So I need to be careful about, like using that as a, as inspiration, but not as a
Aspiration and inspiration rather than as
yeah.
as a club, right? Weaponizing it
Yep.
against you.
Well, that's. I just want to say for everybody listening, everybody here, I mean, that's in the biggest way. That's an important thing, because most all of us, I think, have the experience of using gratitude to beat the crap out of ourselves. It's
Yeah,
like
that's
that's not gratitude. It's like it is not. And one of my little nutshells says gratitude and dissatisfaction coexist. So just because and maybe even I'm bitching and moaning too much, it's like I realized during my cancer thing that when anybody would ask me how I was doing, I got to one place and I had to intervene with myself, because I got to one place where I realized anytime somebody could just barely ask me how I was doing, and I was just using it as a reason to start complaining.
Yep.
And I was just reel them off like that. But it's like, it's okay. You can be complaining. You can have these problems, and I promise you, it doesn't mean that you don't have any gratitude.
I love what you said earlier about you owning our value system and being congruent with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had some medical problems too, and this isn't a comparison thing, but like I've been in
Yeah, how
pain.
bad had they been? Come on.
I've been in pain, and I was talking to some coworkers about it, and they go, "You're the happiest sick person I've ever seen."
Wow. Nice.
And I go, "Well, what else am I going to do?" Right? I mean, I like, I'll complain. I'll measure, my pain over yours, but really, what's it going to do? And like, the other experience I just had on Sunday was, I had an eye appointment, and I show up early because that's, kind of one of the character defects I've worked on over the years. I'm there 5 minutes early and the place is locked. And I'm
Mhm.
standing around, and I ask, and they're like, "Oh, they'll be here." And the woman opens up 5 minutes late. She goes in, locks the door behind her, gets ready, lets me in 5 minutes later. Here, fill out the paperwork. The doctor said, so in my head, I start going down I got here early. Why couldn't you? Why schedule 11:30 appointment when you're gonna see me at 11:45? Like, I
Mhm.
see those thoughts arise, right? And this is emotional survival.
Right.
It's like, but I'm not clinging to them, right?
Mhm.
And through the door, I hear the optometrist. He's playing music. And sure enough, he's playing Deja Vu by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I don't know if you were there, Alan, but last Thursday in the workshop, the book study, I used that song as a talking point for the book study. And
That's
so
great.
I'm like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cool, man.
It's wonderful when
Beautiful.
those, like, if I'm awake, aware, conscious, I can see those things versus, being so
Yes.
stuck in my, my demands.
Yep.
Hi, Timo. Hi, Timo.
Mhm.
A good friend
Hey,
of mine.
Tom, when you said the thing about being the happiest sick man,
Yeah.
it's like, it reminded me immediately. I was back in the days where we didn't do stuff online, but I used to get a lot of traffic tickets. I've gone straight now. I'm no longer a criminal, but I used to have to go into the traffic schools and all that stuff a lot. And there's always giant lines and this kind of stuff. And I remember being in one of these giant lines, and this guy behind me in line, he said, he said, excuse me. He said, are you having fun? You know, because and I thought about it because my response was like you, what else am I going to do? It's like, of course I'm having fun, you know? It's like, it's a bunch of people here hanging out. You know, we all have the same, you know, we all have to do it. So let's have a good time. And that's one of the ways I think back, and I'm grateful, you know, so a time where I'm not beating myself up. I'm grateful that even before I was thinking in terms of emotional sobriety, I had some of this stuff already kind of down. You know, it's kind of nice that some of that is in my nature. So, but I
Well,
love that you're the happiest sick man we know.
it comes from being a fellow smartass, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
even
yes,
I'm stuck in line, I'm gonna,
that's it.
think of, jokes and, and trying to make fun of some people.
We're gonna make use of this time. That's right.
Yeah.
Does someone need to believe in God to successfully overcome addiction? Well, the way I like to think about what the program does, it connects us to who we really are. And what does that mean? Well, there's this incredible force in you and I, this growth force. It's the force that moved us from crawling to walking. You wanted to take those first steps. And when you fell, and you fell a lot of times, you didn't let your failures stop you. You picked yourself up, you learned from it. And how many times did you fail before you walked? You failed as many times as you needed to. You see that force, I call it a biological imperative, a psychological imperative, a spiritual imperative. It's moving you towards wholeness. It's moving you to be what you can be. Just like in the acorn is all the information it needs to become an oak tree. In you is all the information you need to become you. Become a you that can cope with life and to deal with whatever you need to deal with to be okay. And that's what I'll talk about in my new book, The 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety.